Dagda agus tá fáilte romh is mis an scéala beag. Hello, and you're very welcome. I'm the little storyteller. I'm coming to you from our Live at Five session. Hosted with the Irish Pagan School, where we kind of gather socially. In this time of physical distance, we're not socially distant, and we have people from all over the world, like spanning various continents, countries, and everything, gather to talk about their spirituality, their paganism, their practice, their nerditries, their passions. It's been absolutely amazing. I've been delighted to be able to facilitate this for the last 3 months. But as happened on the last session we did, which was Tuesday, we did a session referred to as Pennies in the John, where people would gather their thought or their question as this idea of a penny, and that they would throw it into my brain to see what kind of ripples would come out and hear my opinions or my expressions about many different things. It was a really great session. I'm very, very humbled and honored that so many people were engaged with it. But one person did not get to did not get to throw their penny. And so for this occasion, we are going to do an additional recording for that specific penny. Alan?
Hello, John. So my penny, which is nice and shiny for you, if you could record a message and make sure that every male in the world could hear it, what would it be?
It's a very difficult penny because it's so important to the world right now. If every man on this planet could hear my voice, I would ask them initially to consider who they are, consider what they are, and consider what they want to be. Because so many men in our world have been raised and defined in a very specific set of parameters and socializations. Now, I'm coming from a Western European culture myself, growing up in Ireland in the 80s, and I was raised where, to be a man's man. I was always confused by that, because isn't a man's man someone who likes men? Whereas a man's man is apparently this macho man. But what is macho? It's a musculature, it's a physique thing. So a man is a physical form, and that is it. But that didn't make sense either. And so it's important to acknowledge that men are human. All men are human, and that's the first thing we are. Before we're defined as men, before we're defined as anything else, we are human. Every single one of us is born of a human. Every single one of us comes out crying, or is encouraged to cry very quickly afterwards to make sure our lungs work. We are just a physical form. We are just this vessel that grows. And it's only as we begin to grow that we begin to identify, begin to understand who and what we are in respect to the culture and the society around us. Every single person cried for food before they had words. Every single person on this planet crawled or wriggled in some way before they could stand. And every single person ends their days with a final breath. That is just fundamental. And so whatever biological circumstances you have on you, you're still the same as every other person. Whatever way you are inside you, you're still the same as every other person in those regards, in that respect. And so a lot of the culture that raises men and this idea of masculinity is something I'm wrangling with a lot, has been men need to be physical. They need to be powerful. They need to be dominant. They need to be aggressive. They need to be able to fight. But when you go back far enough, if you dig into the history, the whole purpose of that was to weaponize a gender. To take a human being and to strip it of its softer emotions, to strip it of its compassion, so that it would be willing to die and kill for a purpose. That is what men were. right the way back to the Fenian cultures, the war bands, go back to Cuchulainn, go back to the Red Branch Knights of Ulster. Men were men because they had to be willing to fight, because they had to be willing to kill. That's what made you a man. And that's terrible. We've come a long way since then. But even in more recent history, after World War One, there's a UK politician by the name of Lloyd George. He's ranked as one of their largest and most revered socialist individuals who brought forward social housing and social care and social welfare and all the rest of it. And this is a big thing that he's given props for. But when you dig into the history, the reason why he pushed all of these social programs through the parliament in the UK was specifically to breed a better cannon fodder. His words. Because they knew there would be another world war. And so they wanted to take their population to the point where they were more physically capable. And that's where the socialist programs came from. All of which is coming from this culture that defines men as weapons, trains men as weapons. And what happens when you train a man to a certain way or raise a man, irrespective of them going into an armed forces, a military service, anything like that at all, if the culture is raising men to be violent, you end up with violent men. And where does that violence go? The only time you see those expressions is where a man feels safe to express in that way. And that's a very scary thing to consider. Because if a man is in a fight, if a man is out in the world, there's a constant assessment that goes on. Can I beat that guy in a fight? Will he beat me in the fight? And it's very rare that a man would go into a fight if he isn't sure he's going to at least draw even, if not win. So where else does this come out? That's a safety thing. Because again, human, your first port of call as a human being is self-preservation. It's one of your basic instincts. So where is this weaponized man safest? Home. Who else is home? Family. Who else ends up being the target for, unfortunately, some of the worst and most toxic programming that exists for a human being? Those closest to them. Statistics speak very clearly that, okay, well, maybe I don't want to go blanketing statistics from the world, but even in Ireland, the most statistically highest likelihood of a domestic violence situation or a physical assault on a woman happens from a man they know. It's not strangers. Now, it is strangers as well. There's a percentage of that happens out in the dark streets and on the dark alleys, but there's a larger percentage for people that they know. Family members, friends, lovers, or ex-lovers. I have personally lost friends because they dumped a guy. And then that person, the man, unfortunately, not having been compassionately trained in mental awareness, in emotional awareness, having not been compassionately given the skills to be a whole, complete individual, went back to a default programming. And my friend no longer lives because of that programming. That is the price. That is the problem. So if every man on the world could hear me right now, I'd ask you, who are you and who do you want to be? Because you're a human first. And humans feel. You have a whole range of emotions, not just anger. And every emotion is valid. From the tears that fall on your face as a child, to the ones that fall on your face when the emotions get too big, to the ones that fall on my face right now talking about this. Those emotions are as valid as any other. And you're allowed. You just need to be taught better. You just need to be handed the skills, brought to a place where you are safe so that you don't have to attack. You don't have to feel defensive. Because the problem with our world right now is that 50% of the humans on this planet don't know how to feel healthily. They don't know how to think emotionally. And that is what's leading to so much of the problem. And not just about violence, because violence comes in many different ways. It doesn't have to be blackened bruises. It's the emotional abuse. It's the mental abuse. It's the entitlement to believe that, you are the justifiable pinnacle and peak of your society. It's the psychological domineering evidence that means that, men strive up the corporate ladder in order to dominate their market space and dominate everyone under them. It's part of the problem. I don't have a solution. I don't. I wish I did. But for me, talking about the problem has to start. Talking about mental health for all humans, irrespective of the biological hardware, has to be done. And there needs to be a breakdown of the barriers that exist between men, where men can't talk to men, where men can't feel safe turning around to another man that they have grown up with in their family, that they have played with since they were a kid on the street, or that they have, bled in war or battle with, where men can't turn around and say, I fucking love you to another man, honestly, openly, platonically, non-sexually, where men can't turn around and just embrace, have a physical, tactile interaction. We are fucking humans. We come out of our mothers, and the first thing we do is tactile touch our mother. We are physically placed in contact. We spend the first months, years of our lives receiving physical, tactile interactions, and it's the first reinforcing element that we get. We're crying. What happens? We're cuddled. We're upset. We're afraid. What happens? We're touched. Coming in from the road, scraped and bruised because you dived off a log cart that you shouldn't have been on, you got a hug from your mammy. You got a ruffle on the head from your dad. Physical interactions. And so expecting a human being to be devoid of any healthy physical interaction, just because it's grown up, just because it's a couple of more years of mileage on the machine, is nonsensical. And it's wrong. And the problem is, when a man is physically starved of tactile interaction, and then they get tactile interaction for the first time, it becomes too much. They become obsessed with it. And that leads right the way back to the other points I've mentioned about feeling entitled to physical activity or interaction because they're starved of tactile affection. I don't know. If every man on the planet were to listen to this, maybe there's some part that resonates with them. Maybe there's some question that they actually think about. Or maybe their programming will kick in and they'll be like, it's just some weird Irish guy on the internet. Whatever way that works out, if every man on the planet were to hear me, I'd say I love you. I'd say you're so much more than what people think you are. And the world can be so much better if you choose it to be and do the work at it. Thank you very much.